Late at night in a deserted park, a young homeless man sits alone, trembling from hunger and despair, when suddenly an elderly woman appears, clinging tightly to him and crying, calling him by a name he has never heard before. Moments later, the old woman collapses, her body icy cold. Panicked, the young man uses his only jacket to cover her and with the last of his strength carries her to the hospital. He has no idea that the old woman is the mother of a billionaire and that after this night, his life will change forever. Before we dive into the full story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more stories of kindness every day. The cold had stopped hurting about an hour ago. That was the dangerous part. Caleb knew. When you stopped feeling the cold, when the shivering slowed down and your thoughts got fuzzy, that meant your body was shutting down. That meant you were running out of time. He'd been sitting on this park bench since sunset, watching the snow fall through the amber glow of the street lamps. 21 years old, and this was where life had brought him. No family, no home, no money for a shelter bed tonight. Just this bench, this thin jacket, and the stubborn determination to survive until morning. His stomach had given up growling hours ago. Now it was just a hollow ache, a constant reminder that he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, when he'd found half a sandwich in a trash can outside a coffee shop. He'd learned not to be proud about things like that. Pride was a luxury for people who had options. Caleb kept his head down, his hood pulled up. Eye contact was dangerous when you were homeless. It invited questions from concerned citizens who'd call the cops, or worse, from other people on the streets who saw you as competition for resources. Better to stay invisible, stay quiet, stay alive. He didn't notice her at first, didn't hear her shuffling footsteps or see her thin figure emerging from the darkness beyond the lamplight. It wasn't until she spoke that he realized he wasn't alone anymore. "Daniel?" The voice was elderly, trembling with cold and something else. Confusion, maybe. Fear. Caleb looked up and saw her. An old white woman, maybe 70 or 75, standing a few feet away in nothing but a thin cardigan and slacks. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Her white hair was dusted with snow, and her face was wet with tears that were freezing on her cheeks. "Daniel, is that you?" Before Caleb could answer, before he could even process what was happening, she rushed forward and threw her arms around him. Her embrace was desperate, her whole body shaking as she sobbed into his shoulder. "Oh Daniel, I found you, thank God I found you." Caleb's muscles tensed, his first instinct pure survival mode. Was this a setup? Some kind of scam? People didn't just hug strangers in parks at night. His heart hammered against his ribs as he tried to think, tried to figure out the angle. But then he felt the weight of her, the genuine trembling, the ice-cold touch of her skin through his thin jacket. This wasn't an act. Whatever was happening here, this woman really believed he was someone named Daniel. "Ma'am," Caleb said carefully, his voice rough from not speaking all day. "Ma'am, I think you got the wrong person." She pulled back just enough to look at his face, her weathered hands coming up to cup his cheeks. Her eyes searched his features with a desperate intensity, but there was something wrong with her gaze. It was unfocused, sliding past him and then back again, like she was seeing him through water. "Daniel, you're so cold. Why are you out here? Why didn't you come home?" "I'm not Daniel," Caleb said gently. "My name is Caleb. I don't know who Daniel is." But she wasn't listening, or maybe she couldn't hear him. She just kept holding his face, kept crying, kept looking at him like he was the most important person in the world. Caleb had seen this before. Near the end, before his mother died, she'd gotten confused like this. Would think Caleb was his father, or her own brother, or sometimes people Caleb had never heard of. The doctors had called it Alzheimer's disease. A slow theft of memory, of recognition, of self. "Ma'am, are you okay? Are you hurt?" The woman swayed on her feet, and Caleb caught her by the elbows to keep her upright. She was so light, so fragile, like a bird made of paper and glass, and she was freezing. Even colder than Caleb, which meant she'd been out here longer. "How do you know my name?" Caleb tried again, still half convinced this had to be some kind of trick. "Ma'am, how do you know who I am?" "Of course I know you," she murmured, her voice fading. "You're my boy, my Daniel, my sweet boy." Her knees buckled, and Caleb had to wrap his arms around her to keep her from falling. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, and he could feel how violently she was shaking. This was bad. This was really bad. Caleb looked around the empty park, at the snow falling heavier now, at the complete absence of any other people. No one was coming to help. No one even knew they were here. He should call 911. That was the smart thing to do, but Caleb didn't have a phone. hadn't been able to afford one in over a year, and leaving her here while he ran to find help felt wrong, dangerous. In her condition, in this cold, she might not have that kind of time. Okay, Caleb said, making a decision. Okay, let's get you sitting down. Come on, easy does it. He guided her to the bench, moving slowly so she wouldn't fall. She clung to him the whole way, trusting him completely with her weight, with her safety. Something about that trust made Caleb's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He got her seated and crouched in front of her, looking up into her face. The street lamp cast harsh shadows under her eyes, making her look even more exhausted and lost than she probably was. "Ma'am, what's your name? Can you tell me your name?" She blinked at him, her lips moving soundlessly for a moment. Then with visible effort, she focused on his face. "Margaret," she whispered. "Margaret Reynolds." "Okay, Margaret, that's good. Do you know where you live? Can you tell me your address?" But she was already drifting again, her eyes losing focus. She reached out and touched Caleb's face with fingers that felt like ice. "You look so tired," she said. "Have you been working too hard again? I tell you not to work so hard." Caleb didn't correct her this time. He just took her freezing hands in his and tried to rub some warmth into them, tried to think of what to do next. He couldn't leave her here. That much was clear, but he couldn't carry her to safety either, not in his condition. He was already weak from hunger and exposure, already operating on the last reserves of his strength. And where would he even take her? He didn't know where she lived, didn't have a phone to call for help, didn't have any resources at all. But he also couldn't just sit here and watch her freeze to death. Margaret leaned into him, seeking his warmth, and Caleb made a choice. He sat down beside her on the bench and put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. It wasn't much, it wouldn't save either of them if they stayed here too long. But maybe it would buy them some time, keep her a little warmer while he figured out what to do. "It's okay," he said softly, not sure if he was talking to her or to himself. "We're going to figure this out, I promise." Margaret sighed and closed her eyes, and Caleb felt the full weight of her life settling into his hands. A stranger who thought he was her son. A woman who needed help he wasn't sure he could give, but he couldn't walk away. Despite everything, despite his own desperate situation, despite the voice in his head screaming that he needed to focus on his own survival, Caleb couldn't leave her alone in the cold. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, words she'd spoken in one of her last lucid moments before the Alzheimer's took her completely. "Baby, listen to me. The world is going to be hard on you, harder than it should be. And when it gets hard, you're going to want to become hard too, to protect yourself. But don't let it take your kindness. That's the only thing that really belongs to you, the only thing they can't take unless you give it away. As long as you have that, you're never truly empty." Caleb held Margaret Reynolds a little tighter and decided that tonight, at least, he'd hold on to his kindness, even if it killed him. The wind picked up, driving snow into their faces. Caleb pulled Margaret closer, trying to shield her with his body. She'd stopped shivering, which he knew was a bad sign. When your body gave up trying to warm itself, when it started shutting down non-essential functions to protect the core, that meant you were in serious trouble. "Margaret," Caleb said, patting her cheek gently, "Mrs. Reynolds, you need to stay awake. Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Richard," she murmured. "Who's Richard?" "My husband. He'll be so worried. We just had dinner. Where am I?" Her face crumpled with confusion and fear, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Caleb had seen this too with his mother, the way the present and past would blend together, creating a reality that only existed in the fractured landscape of a damaged mind. "You're in the park," Caleb said. "But we're going to get you home soon, I promise. Daniel should be home by now," Margaret said, her voice getting stronger for a moment. "He works too much. I tell him all the time, you work too much, you need to rest. But he doesn't listen. Never listens to his mother." She patted Caleb's hand with her frozen fingers, a maternal gesture that made his throat tight. "Are you hungry, sweetheart? You look so thin. Are you eating enough?" The question hit Caleb like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time anyone had looked at him with concern instead of suspicion or pity, or disgust? "I'm okay," he lied. "Don't worry about me." But Margaret was already fumbling with her purse, her numb fingers struggling with the clasp. After several attempts, she managed to get it open and pulled out a worn leather wallet. She opened it and removed all the cash inside, a thick fold of bills that Caleb couldn't make himself count, couldn't let himself think about. "Here," she said, pressing the money into his hands. "Take it, please Daniel, take it." Caleb stared down at the bills in his palm. In the dim light, he could see they were mostly 20s, maybe some 50s, enough money to buy a hot meal, maybe two, enough for a night in a cheap motel where he could sleep without fear of freezing or being robbed or worse, enough to change everything, at least for a little while. His stomach clenched with hunger so intense it was almost painful. His fingers, the ones that could still feel, curled around the bills automatically, his body making the decision before his mind could catch up. I don't need it, Margaret continued, tears streaming down her face. You need it more. Please baby, take it. Make your mother happy. Caleb looked at her face, at the desperate love there, the maternal instinct that even Alzheimer's couldn't completely erase. She thought he was her son. She thought she was taking care of her boy. And Caleb thought about his own mother, about the last time she'd been lucid enough to recognize him. She'd been in the hospital, dying slowly from the same disease that had already taken her mind. But she'd grabbed his hand with surprising strength and made him promise something. Promise me you won't let the world make you cruel, she'd said. Promise me that no matter how hard it gets, you'll keep your kindness. That's the only thing that makes you rich, baby. Not money, not success, kindness. If you still have that, you still have everything that matters. Caleb closed his eyes and felt the war raging inside him. He was starving, he was freezing. He was so tired of struggling, of surviving on scraps and charity and luck. This money could help him. This money could save him. But taking it would mean becoming someone else, someone his mother wouldn't recognize. Slowly, with hands that shook from more than just cold, Caleb opened Margaret's purse and put the money back inside her wallet. He tucked the wallet carefully into the purse and closed the clasp, then placed the purse in Margaret's lap. No ma'am, he said quietly. You keep that. I don't need it. Margaret stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. The fog lifted, just for a heartbeat, and she looked at him with sudden startling clarity. She saw him. Not Daniel, him. Caleb. What's your name? She asked, her voice different now, stronger. Caleb. Caleb, right. Why are you here, Caleb? In this park, in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter. The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Caleb found himself answering honestly. I don't have anywhere else to go. No family. He shook his head. My mom died a few years back, cancer first, then Alzheimer's. Toward the end she was like you, couldn't remember things, couldn't remember me sometimes. It was hard to watch. Margaret's cold hand found his and squeezed gently. I'm so sorry, child. It's okay, at least she's not suffering anymore. And your father, never knew him. It was just me and my mom, and now it's just me. Where do you sleep? Caleb gestured vaguely at the park around them. Wherever I can, sometimes shelters if there's space, but usually not. Most places want ID, want proof of address, want things I don't have, so I sleep outside mostly. Under bridges, in parks, in doorways. You learn to make it work, but tonight you have nowhere. Tonight I have this bench, Caleb said with a weak smile. I've had worse spots. Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying his face with those suddenly clear eyes. Then she said something that made Caleb's chest tighten. You could have taken that money. You were hungry enough to take it. I could see it in your face, in your eyes. You wanted to take it. Yes, ma'am. But you didn't. No, ma'am. Why not? Caleb looked down at their joined hands, hers so pale and wrinkled, his so dark and young. Because my mom taught me that kindness is the only thing I own that nobody can take away from me. She said that as long as I have that, I'm never really empty, never really poor, and she was right. That's all I have left of her now. Her lessons, her love, her belief that I could be better than my circumstances. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was the best person I ever knew. Margaret squeezed his hand again. She raised a good son. The fog was descending again. Caleb could see it. Margaret's eyes were losing focus, her grip on his hand loosening. She swayed slightly, and Caleb had to steady her. Mrs. Reynolds. Margaret. So tired, she mumbled. So very tired. I know, but you can't fall asleep. Not out here. Margaret, listen to me. You need to stay awake. But her eyes were already closing, her body going limp against his side. Caleb's heart began to race. This was it. This was the decision point. He could try to flag down a passing car, but no cars had passed in over an hour. He could leave her here and run for help, but she might not survive the time it took him to find a phone and get someone to come back. Or he could do the only thing that made sense, even though it might kill them both. Caleb stood up, his legs protesting after sitting in the cold for so long. He bent down and carefully lifted Margaret into his arms, then shifted her weight onto his back in a piggyback carry. her arms draped loosely over his shoulders, her head lolling against his neck. "Hold on," he told her, even though he wasn't sure she could hear him anymore. "Just hold on, Mrs. Reynolds, we're going to get you help." The hospital was about 15 blocks away. Caleb had walked past it before, had even thought about going to the emergency room once, when he'd been sick with a fever that wouldn't break. But he'd been too afraid of the questions, too worried about being arrested for not having insurance or ID. But Margaret needed help now, and Caleb was the only person who could get her there. He started walking into the blizzard, carrying a woman he just met, risking his life for a stranger who'd mistaken him for her son. And with every step, he heard his mother's voice telling him that this was what it meant to be human. This was what it meant to be good, even if nobody ever knew, even if nobody ever cared, even if it cost him everything. The first block was the hardest. Caleb's legs were already weak from hunger and cold, and Margaret's weight, light as she was, felt like carrying a boulder. Every step was a negotiation with his body, a battle between what he knew he had to do and what his failing muscles could actually accomplish. The snow had turned vicious, driven by wind that cut through his thin jacket like it wasn't even there. Ice formed on his eyelashes, making it hard to see. His feet, already numb, slipped on the icy sidewalk with every other step. He fell to one knee in the second block, caught himself with one hand while keeping Margaret secure with the other, forced himself back up. "Stay with me," he muttered, not sure if he was talking to Margaret or to himself. "Just stay with me." Margaret stirred slightly on his back, her breath warm against his frozen neck. "Daniel." "Yeah," Caleb gasped. "Yeah, it's Daniel. I'm here, I've got you." "Where are we going?" "Getting you help. Just hold on. I'm scared." "I know, me too, but we're going to make it." By the fourth block, Caleb's vision was starting to blur. The edges of the world seemed to pulse and fade, like someone was turning the lights up and down. His breathing had become labored, each inhale burning in his lungs, each exhale a cloud of white that was immediately torn away by the wind. He stumbled again, this time going down on both knees. Pain shot through his legs, but he barely felt it. Everything was distant now, muffled, like he was watching himself from somewhere far away. "Get up," he told himself. "Come on, get up." His body didn't want to obey. It wanted to stay down, to rest, to give in to the cold that was no longer uncomfortable but almost pleasant now, almost warm. That was the dangerous part. That was how people died in the snow. They stopped hurting and started feeling peaceful, and then they just never got up again. Caleb thought about his mother, thought about the promise he'd made her, thought about Margaret Reynolds trusting him with her life because her broken mind had decided he was her son. He got up. Sixth block, seventh block, each one an eternity, each step a victory. Caleb's mind was starting to play tricks on him, showing him things that weren't there. He saw his mother standing on a corner, smiling at him, telling him to keep going. He saw warm lights that turned out to be just reflections in ice. He saw the hospital entrance a dozen times, only to blink and find he was still blocks away. "Almost there," he said, his voice barely a whisper now. "Almost there, Mrs. Reynolds." Margaret had gone silent on his back, her weight dead and heavy. Caleb couldn't tell if she was unconscious or worse, and he couldn't let himself think about it. He just had to keep moving, just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Eighth block, ninth block, his legs were going to give out. Caleb could feel it, could feel the way his muscles were beginning to fail, the way each step was becoming more of a controlled fall than actual walking. He was running on nothing now, on fumes, on pure stubborn will, but it wasn't enough. In the 10th block, his knee buckled completely, and this time he couldn't catch himself. He went down hard, twisting at the last second to take the impact on his shoulder instead of letting Margaret hit the ground. Pain exploded through his body, but he kept his arms locked around her legs, kept her safe even as he lay there in the snow, unable to move. "Help," he tried to call out, but his voice was gone. "Please, somebody help us." No one answered. The street was empty, the world reduced to nothing but wind and snow and darkness. Caleb tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't support his weight anymore. He tried again, managed to get to his knees, then collapsed once more. Margaret slid partially off his back, and he scrambled to keep hold of her, to keep her head out of the snow. This was it. This was as far as he could go. He'd tried, he'd given everything he had, but it wasn't an "I'm sorry," he whispered to Margaret, to his mother, to whoever might be listening. "I'm so sorry." And then he saw them. Lights, real lights, not a hallucination this time. Bright lights cutting through the snow, growing larger, getting closer. A car was coming down the street, moving slowly through the storm. Caleb raised one arm, waving weakly. "Help," he croaked. "Please help." The car slowed, stopped, a door opened. Caleb heard shouting, heard running footsteps crunching through the snow. "Mom! Oh my God, Mom!" Strong hands were on him, rolling him over, checking Margaret. A man's face, wild with fear and relief, looked down at him. "Who are you? What happened?" Caleb tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The world was spinning now, tilting sideways, turning dark around the edges. "Hospital," he managed to whisper. "She needs hospital. We're going right now, both of you." Caleb felt himself being lifted, felt Margaret being taken from his arms. He tried to hold on to her, to make sure she was okay, but his body had nothing left to give. "It's okay," the man's voice said from somewhere far away. "I've got her. I've got both of you. You saved her. Do you understand me? You saved my mother's life." Caleb felt himself being loaded into a car, felt warmth beginning to seep into his frozen body, and then he felt nothing at all as consciousness finally, mercifully slipped away. Daniel Reynolds had been in meetings all evening, his phone silenced, his mind focused on quarterly projections and market analysis. It wasn't until he'd walked out of the conference room after 9 p.m. that he saw the missed calls, 12 of them, all from his mother's home number. His stomach had dropped like a stone. Something was wrong. The voicemail from his mother's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, confirmed his worst fears. "Daniel, it's Patricia. Your mother walked out about an hour ago. She was confused, said she needed to find someone. I tried to stop her, but she got past me. I've called the police. Please call me back." Patricia, the caregiver he'd hired 6 months ago, the woman he trusted to watch his mother while he built his career, climbed the corporate ladder, made the money that paid for the big house and the medical care and all the things he thought mattered. Daniel had left work immediately, calling Patricia back as he ran to his car. "Where is she? Have they found her?" "Not yet. The police are looking." "I'm so sorry, Mr. Reynolds. I only looked away for a minute." Daniel's hands shook as he started the car. Outside, a blizzard was raging. His mother, who couldn't remember what year it was half the time, was out there somewhere in that storm. He drove slowly through his mother's neighborhood, peering through the snow at every shape, every shadow. He checked the grocery store she used to walk to, the park where she liked to feed birds, the church she'd attended for 40 years. Nothing. "Please," he whispered to the empty car, to God, to anyone who might be listening. "Please let her be okay." He expanded his search, driving in wider circles, calling out the window when he saw anyone on the streets. Other drivers honked at him for going too slow, for stopping in the middle of the road, but Daniel didn't care. Nothing mattered except finding his mother. It was nearly midnight when he saw them. At first it was just a shape in his headlights, a person, hunched over moving slowly through the snow. Daniel's heart leaped, but as he got closer, he realized it wasn't just one person. Someone was carrying someone else on their back. Daniel leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, and his breath caught in his throat. The clothing, the white hair visible even through the snow, the way the person being carried held themselves, that distinctive slump of his mother's shoulders. "Mom." He slammed the car into park and threw open his door, running through the snow without feeling the cold, without feeling anything except the desperate need to reach her. The young man carrying his mother turned at Daniel's shout. He was black, maybe early 20s, thin to the point of gaunt. His face was drawn with exhaustion and pain, his eyes hollow and barely focused. As Daniel watched, the young man's legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, then forward, twisting at the last second to protect Daniel's mother from the fall. "Mom." Daniel dropped beside them, his hands going to his mother's face. Her skin was ice cold, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. She was alive. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, looking at the young man who was now lying in the snow, barely conscious. "What happened? What did you do?" The young man's eyes struggled to focus on Daniel's face. His lips moved, and Daniel had to lean close to hear the words. "Hospital. She needs hospital." "What happened to her? Where did you find her?" "Park. She was lost, confused, too cold, had to get her help." The young man's eyes were closing, his body going limp. Daniel looked between him and his mother, his mind racing. This kid had been carrying his mother through a blizzard, carrying her toward help. He'd been saving her. "Okay," Daniel said, making a decision. "Okay, I'm getting you both to the hospital. Right now." He lifted his mother as gently as he could, carrying her to his car and laying her across the back seat. Then he ran back for the young man, who was trying and failing to get up. "Come on," Daniel said, putting his arm around the kid's shoulders and helping him stand. "I've got you." "She okay?" the young man mumbled. "She's going to be, thanks to you." Daniel got him into the front passenger seat, then ran around to the driver's side. The hospital was only 3 blocks away, 3 blocks that felt like 300 as Daniel navigated the icy roads, constantly glancing at his mother in the rearview mirror, at the young man slumped against the passenger window. "Stay with me," Daniel said. "Both of you just stay with me." He pulled up to the emergency entrance and laid on the horn. Medical staff came running out, and Daniel was shouting before they even reached the car. "Hypothermia. Both of them. My mother has Alzheimer's, she was lost in the storm." The next minutes were controlled chaos. His mother being lifted onto a gurney, wheeled away under bright lights. The young man being helped out of the car, supported by 2 nurses as his legs gave out again. He carried her. Daniel told the doctor who appeared at his side. "I don't know how far, but he carried my mother through that storm to get her help." The doctor looked at the young man with new respect. "We'll take care of him. Both of them are in good hands now." Daniel watched them wheel the young man away, watched him disappear through the emergency room doors, and then, alone in the bright lights of the ambulance bay, Daniel Reynolds broke down and cried. A stranger had saved his mother's life. A kid who looked like he'd been living on the streets, who'd been out in that storm himself with nowhere to go, had carried his confused elderly mother towards safety even though it nearly killed him. Daniel had spent years telling himself that hiring good caregivers was enough, that writing checks and setting up systems was the same thing as being present, that his mother understood he was busy, that she knew he loved her even if he rarely visited. But tonight when it mattered most, he hadn't been there. A homeless kid had done what Daniel should have done, had been the son Daniel should have been. "I'm sorry, Mom," Daniel whispered into the cold night air. "I'm so sorry." Inside alarms were going off, voices were calling urgently. Daniel ran toward the emergency room entrance, toward his mother, toward the young man who'd saved her life, and made a promise to himself. This was going to change. Everything was going to change, starting right now. 3 hours later, Daniel sat in the hospital waiting room, his expensive suit rumpled, his hair a mess from running his hands through it repeatedly. A doctor had come out once to tell him that his mother was stable, warming slowly, responding well to treatment. But there was no word yet on the young man. Daniel didn't even know his name. Patricia, the caregiver, had arrived about an hour ago, full of apologies and explanations. Daniel had barely been able to look at her. His mother had walked out of her own home, confused and lost, and Patricia hadn't noticed for over an hour. Over an hour, anything could have happened in that time. "Mr. Reynolds," a nurse called from the doorway. "You can see your mother now. She's awake." Daniel followed the nurse through a maze of hallways to a private room where his mother lay in a hospital bed, covered in heated blankets. Her eyes were open, clearer than they'd been in months, and she smiled when she saw him. "Daniel," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "Mom." Daniel pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, confused." "What happened?" "You went for a walk, you got lost in the storm." Margaret's forehead creased with worry. "I did. I don't remember." "It's okay, you're safe now. That's all that matters." "There was a young man," Margaret said slowly, her eyes distant as she tried to capture the memory. "In the park. He was so cold. I thought he was you. He brought you here," Daniel said. "He carried you through the snow to the hospital. Where is he? Is he all right?" "I don't know yet." Before Daniel could say more, Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with agitation. "Mr. Reynolds, could I speak with you for a moment?" Daniel stood reluctantly and stepped into the hallway. Patricia's expression was a mixture of concern and something else. Suspicion maybe. Or accusation. "I checked Mrs. Reynolds' belongings," Patricia said, her voice low. "There's money missing from her wallet." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "What?" "She had over $200 this morning. I know because I helped her organize her purse yesterday. Now there's only $40 left." "Are you sure?" "Positive." "Mr. Reynolds, that young man was the only person with your mother tonight. He must have taken it." Daniel looked back through the doorway at his mother, who'd closed her eyes again. Then he thought about the young man who'd collapsed in the snow, who'd used his last reserves of strength to get Margaret to safety. "We don't know that," Daniel said. "Who else could it have been? He's homeless, Mr. Reynolds. Living on the streets. Your mother was confused, probably had no idea what was happening. It would have been easy for him to stop, Daniel said sharply. We're not making accusations without proof. But I said stop. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'm calling my attorney. We're going to pull security footage from the hospital, from any cameras near the park, anywhere we can find. If that young man stole from my mother, we'll know. But if he didn't, I want to know who did. Patricia's face went pale. I really don't think that's necessary. I do. In fact, I think we should pull footage from my mother's house too, just to be thorough. Mr. Reynolds, how long have you been working for me, Patricia? 6 months, 7. And in those 7 months has my mother mentioned losing money before? Patricia hesitated just a fraction too long. Well, sometimes with her condition she forgets where she puts things. That wasn't my question. Has she mentioned losing money? I believe she mentioned it once or twice. But with Alzheimer's, you can't always trust. Daniel's eyes narrowed. I want a full audit. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every penny that's gone through my mother's accounts since you started working for us. Mr. Reynolds, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Money is missing and you're very eager to blame someone who risked his life to save my mother. That makes me suspicious. Down the hall, a door opened and a doctor emerged. Daniel recognized him as the one who'd taken the young man inside. Excuse me, Daniel called out. The young man who came in with my mother, how is he? The doctor walked over. He's stable now. Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, dehydration, complete physical exhaustion. We're warming him slowly and getting fluids into him. He'll survive, but it was close. Another hour out in that cold, and we'd be having a different conversation. Can I see him? He's sleeping, but yes, just for a few minutes. Daniel followed the doctor to a room down the hall. The young man lay in a hospital bed, covered in thermal blankets. Medical equipment beeped softly around him, tracking his slow return from the edge. He looked even younger asleep, his face smooth and unguarded. Daniel realized he couldn't be more than 21, 22 maybe. Just a kid. A kid who'd nearly died saving a stranger. Do you know his name? Daniel asked. Caleb Wright. That's all we got from him before he passed out. Caleb Wright. Daniel repeated the name silently, committing it to memory. The remarkable thing, the doctor continued, is that he asked us to help your mother first, even though he was in worse shape, even though he could barely speak. That was his only concern. Getting her taken care of. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This kid, this stranger who had nothing, had put Margaret's welfare above his own. And Patricia wanted to accuse him of theft. Thank you, Daniel said, for taking care of both of them. Back in the hallway, Patricia was waiting, her expression anxious. Mr. Reynolds, about the money, we're done talking about the money, until we have proof. Daniel said. Go home, Patricia, I'll call you when I need you. But Mrs. Reynolds will need, I'll take care of my mother. That's my job, not yours. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She left without another word, her footsteps quick and sharp on the linoleum floor. Daniel went back to his mother's room, and sat down in the chair beside her bed. She was asleep again, breathing peacefully under the warm blankets. He took her hand, and held it gently, feeling the fragile bones beneath papery skin. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I let this happen. His phone buzzed with a text from his attorney. Security footage was being collected. They'd have answers within 24 hours. Daniel suspected he already knew what those answers would be. The way Patricia had tried to deflect, to avoid the audit, to blame Caleb so quickly. The pieces fit together in an ugly picture. But he'd wait for proof, he'd do this right, and then he'd make sure that Caleb Wright, who'd saved his mother's life, got the apology and the gratitude he deserved. The security footage arrived at 8 a.m. the next morning, delivered by Daniel's attorney, along with a detailed analysis. Daniel watched it alone in a private consultation room the hospital had provided, his jaw tightening with every frame. There was footage from the park, grainy but clear enough. It showed Margaret wandering into the frame, confused and cold. Then Caleb, sitting on a bench, hunched and miserable. Margaret approaching him, embracing him. The two of them sitting together, and then the crucial moment, Margaret opening her purse, pulling out money, pressing it into Caleb's hands. The footage quality wasn't good enough to see facial expressions, but Daniel could see Caleb's body language. The way he held the money for a long moment, the way his shoulders slumped, the way he carefully put it back into Margaret's purse. He'd been telling the truth, he'd refused the money. The second set of footage was from Daniel's mother's house, from security cameras Daniel had forgotten he'd even installed. This footage was much clearer, and much more damning. It showed Patricia, over multiple days, opening Margaret's purse when his mother was sleeping or confused, taking bills from her wallet, not large amounts at once, just a 20 here, a 50 there. Careful theft, spread out over time. Easy to blame on confusion, on misplacement, on an elderly woman's failing memory. Daniel felt sick. He'd trusted this woman with his mother's care, had paid her generously, given her access to his mother's home, his mother's belongings, his mother's life, and she'd been stealing. Not just money, she'd been stealing trust, stealing dignity, stealing the safety his mother deserved. And when she'd been caught, when the missing money had been discovered, she'd tried to frame Caleb. A kid who'd nearly died saving Margaret, a kid who'd had every reason to take that money, and had chosen not to. Daniel's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Mr. Reynolds, Caleb Wright is awake. He's asking about your mother." "I'll be right there." Daniel found Caleb sitting up in bed, looking small and lost in a hospital gown that was too big for him. His eyes were clearer than they'd been last night, but there were shadows under them that spoke of more than just one night of hardship. "Mr. Reynolds," Caleb said when Daniel entered. "Is she okay, your mom?" "She's fine, thanks to you." Daniel pulled up a chair. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but I'm okay." Caleb paused. "Look, about the hospital bills. Don't worry about that. I'm taking care of it. I can't let you do that. I don't want charity. It's not charity. You saved my mother's life. This is the least I can do." Caleb looked down at his hands. "The woman who was here yesterday, the caregiver. She said I stole money from your mom." "I know, she was wrong, was she?" Caleb's voice was bitter. "I mean that's what everyone thinks, right? Homeless black kid with an elderly white woman, of course he stole from her." "I don't think that," Daniel said firmly. "And I have proof that you didn't." He pulled out his phone and showed Caleb the park footage. Showed him taking the money, considering it, and putting it back. "You told the truth," Daniel said. "My mother tried to give you money, and you refused it. Even though you were starving and freezing, even though you needed it desperately, you put it back." Caleb stared at the screen, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Patricia was the one stealing," Daniel continued. "She'd been taking money from my mother for months, small amounts, carefully hidden. And when the missing money was discovered last night, she tried to frame you to cover her own tracks. What's going to happen to her? She's been fired, and depending on whether my mother wants to press charges, she may face criminal prosecution. Your mom probably won't even remember," Caleb said sadly. "The theft I mean, probably not, but I remember, and I owe you an apology." Daniel leaned forward. "I should have trusted you immediately. Instead I let someone make accusations based on assumptions, based on prejudice. That was wrong. It's okay, I'm used to it. That doesn't make it okay." Daniel took a breath. "Caleb, the doctors told me you asked them to help my mother first. Even though you were in worse shape, you were more worried about her. She needed help more than I did. No, you were both in critical condition, but you put her first anyway." Daniel shook his head. "Why? You didn't know her. She was just a confused old woman who mistook you for her son." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "My mom had Alzheimer's. Near the end, she'd forget who I was sometimes. Would call me by other names, think I was someone else. It used to hurt, but then I realized she wasn't seeing a stranger when she looked at me. She was seeing someone she loved, someone who made her feel safe." He looked up at Daniel. "Your mom looked at me, and saw her son, saw someone who would protect her, someone who wouldn't let her down. I couldn't just walk away from that. Even if she'd never remember, even if no one ever knew, I had to try to be the person she thought I was." Daniel felt his eyes burning. This kid, who had nothing, who'd been abandoned by a system that should have protected him, still had more compassion and integrity than most people Daniel knew. "Caleb," Daniel said carefully, "when you're discharged from here, where are you going to go?" Caleb's expression shuddered, becoming carefully neutral. "I'll figure something out. I always do. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Daniel made a decision, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because it was right. Because this young man deserved better than the hand life had dealt him. "I have a proposition for you," Daniel said, "and I want you to really listen before you say no." Caleb looked wary but nodded. "Come stay at my house. There's a guest house on the property, completely separate. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no